Hello, hello everyone. It's Alexey Kuntsevich, and you watching the Frontend Tech show. Um, basically, uh, so today we're gonna talk like we have two presenters, and this talk is specifically related to Angular. And quickly, a couple of words about myself. So I am basically a host for today, and I'm also a creator of frontendwatch.com, where you can learn more about different frameworks. And I'm also organizing and constantly involved into Angular Minsk, Angular Sydney, and Frontend Tech meetups. And also I'm teaching Angular at kuntsevich.dev by running online and offline Angular workshops and email courses. And today we have two awesome speakers coming from completely two different locations. So one speaker, Minko Gechev, he is coming from US, and Vex Tatarevic, he's coming from Australia. We're gonna talk about the latest features in Angular, which been released recently, and then we will be talking about how to build custom web components using Angular. If you guys hear the stream, if there is no issues, just try to engage a little bit if you can, like comment or like send emoji or like anything. Let us know where you're coming from. And also during the talk, you will be able to ask any questions to our speakers. So just to highlight the question is the best way if you just put Q column in front of your question, then put your question and question mark. So this way we can clearly see your questions. And I welcome to our virtual stage, Minko Gechev. Hello, Minko.
Hello, everyone.
So Minko will talk to us about all the latest features in Angular 9. It was the most anticipated Angular release. Everyone, like the whole community, was waiting about it for years, and finally it's been arrived. And Minko will cover every single feature and everything you need to know about the latest Angular 9. All right, welcome to the stage.
Hi. Yeah, hello, everyone. My name is Minko Gechev. I'm working at the Angular team at Google. So today I'm going to be talking to you about what is new in Angular. Since last couple of weeks, since the last time I gave this presentation, now we have Angular 9.1 as well, which has some nice features. So we're going to mention them as well. The biggest news that you're already familiar with is that Angular version 9 is out. I cannot express how excited I am about that because we have been working on this particular version for about 3 years now. And a couple of weeks ago, or actually about a week ago, we released version 9.1 as well, which introduced support for TypeScript 3.8 and a few other minor improvements. So what is new? We did a lot of improvements around the bundle size, about debugging, CSS bindings, so now they have much more deterministic behavior. And although this doesn't sound like something too exciting for everyone, this is really exciting for us at the team because now we have really well-defined behavior for individual different style bindings, and they're much more optimized as well. We have better defined build errors. The build speed is much better for the new compiler that we shipped as part of version 9. We have improvements in the initialization that I'm going to talk about in details in a bit. We updated to version of TypeScript 3.8. There are a lot of improvements in universal hardnesses and so much more. But everything that's pretty much all of this that I discussed, except TypeScript 3.8, was brought to us thanks to the new rendering and compilation pipeline called Ivy. This is the project that I told you that we have been working for about 3 years. And it is finally out there. To be honest, the thing that we tried to do in version 9 is to not break everyone. Because what version 9 was, it was pretty much a rewrite of all the internals of the framework, all the entire compilation pipeline, and so much more. And in Angular, we're trying to provide a large API surface that can reduce the boilerplate in your applications to the minimum. So making sure that we're not breaking anyone or breaking only the most extreme use cases to the minimum, that was a lot of work. We spent probably over a year and a half just making sure that we're as backwards compatible as possible. So the rendering pipeline changed a lot. This is a very, very high level overview, which is not also completely accurate, but to a big extent represents how we were performing rendering in version 8. So in Angular, we have a compiler, very similar to the TypeScript compiler, but in the context of Angular, we're just turning your Angular templates, which are strings, we're turning them to executable JavaScript source code, which is very well optimized for the JavaScript virtual machine. It takes advantage of different optimizations, so it generates some monomorphic source code that is very efficient for execution, thanks to the inline caching property of the JavaScript virtual machine. So in JavaScript, Angular version 8, you can think of the rendering pipeline in such way. So we're looking at your templates, and as part of the output, we're generating source code that directly, so we're kind of pushing internal parts of Angular as part of your ng factories that we generate as output of your templates. In version 9, we changed things a little bit. In order to make Angular more tree-shakeable and easier to optimize by different bundlers and minifiers, such as Cursor, we changed the strategy, and instead of pushing everything that you're going to need, we introduced a bunch of imports in the generated source code that pick only the pieces of the framework that you're actually going to need. So during build time, we can get rid of everything else. So this pretty much means, from your perspective, that we are no longer generating factories. I don't know if you have looked at the output of an Angular version 8 application, but, well, we're generating a lot of files there. First, we have the component.js and the component.dts files, which are the type definitions and the actual logic for your component. We also generate different metadata files. We generate an ng summary file and also a factory file, which is responsible for instantiating different providers, as well as instantiating your components and rendering them on the screen. Now in version 9, we don't have any of these. We just have your component.js file and the DTS file where we have encoded all the metadata that is needed for advanced support by your text editor or IDE. So this is much simpler mental model. And at the same time, instead of generating these factories with unreadable, obscure code, we're just generating a bunch of readable instructions that you can read yourself even without understanding how the internals of the Angular work. They're pretty much mapping of your templates, but in terms of JavaScript instructions, which are just individual functions. So Ivy was not supposed to be a huge release in terms of changelog. It was supposed to be an enabler. I think of it as a bridge to something that would open a lot of doors for us to implement new features into the framework. So this is how, during non-quarantine times, our view from the office looks like. I feel now I miss actually this view when I think about it. So yeah, Ivy was an enabler for smaller bundle size and for a couple of other features that we're going to discuss. In terms of bundle size, for smaller application, you can see about 30% improvement for your app. This is because the framework is now much more tree-shakeable. So smaller applications, they don't usually use a lot of the features of Angular. And because we can get rid of these portions of the framework that you're no longer consuming in your application, you can expect significant improvements. For large applications where you're using most of the framework, and we cannot tree-shake most of it because it's already part of the features that you deliver to your users, you can still expect significant improvements because we're generating much more compact instructions for rendering of your templates. On the other side, if you're building an application which, well, we're considering medium, you're using most of the framework, and at the same time, you don't have enough templates so that we can improve your bundle size much further. In this case, you can expect not that significant improvements. Maybe you'll be about 2% smaller, your application is going to be 2% smaller, or even slightly bigger with 1 or 2%. But in general, in this particular case, when you're using most of the framework and you don't have that many templates that can have significant impact on your bundle size, the improvement is not going to be significantly higher. For some really large applications, we notice really large, really significant improvements. For example, here is one comment from Twitter where the main bundle, the whole application decreased by 11 megabytes. Like, I don't know how large this application originally was. 25 megabytes, that's a lot of source code. But after compiled with Ivy, this entire application bundle dropped to 14 megabytes, which is a pretty significant improvement. On Hacker News, someone pointed out that just by running ng updates, they got 31% improvement without effort on their side. That was what we were aiming for. Like, unfortunately, we weren't able to provide this for completely everyone, but we tried to document all the gotchas that you can find along the way. So together with the bundle size improvements, we also worked on delivering better debugging experience. So talking to a lot of developers, both inside of Google and externally, we hear a lot of complaints about the debugging experience with Angular. And now we started putting together different debugging APIs that can help us build on top more advanced debugging experience. So the first step of this process was introducing this global ng object that has different methods, as you can see here. In debugging, during development mode, you can debug your application by using just these methods. Pretty much get component does pretty much what you would expect. By using ng.getComponent and passing a DOM element to this method, you're going to get the instance of your component associated with this particular DOM element. We have a couple of these methods, and we're still in the process of adding more so that we can provide more sufficient capabilities for helping you understand what's actually going on in your application. As part of the release, we also worked on type checking as well. So a lot of developers I talked to, they're unsatisfied with the fact that they're getting compile time errors. At the same time, in my opinion, getting a compile time error is the best thing that can happen to you after having an application which works without any problems. Because the compile time error means that there is something wrong in your source code and you're catching this error during your development process instead of catching it at production while the user is interacting with your application. So that's why our compiler team spent a lot of time on working on stricter type checking, which is comparable to the type checking that TypeScript provides in your source code. So we're doing something similar in your Angular templates. We have different types of type checking, different modes with different strictness. By default, we have enabled full templates type check, but strict templates is something that you can take advantage of as well. It is quite strict. So in some cases, it might be a little bit more aggressive than you wish. And in these cases, I would recommend you to just go with full template type check for now. So the CSS bindings. I don't expect you to read all this content. This is already available on Angular.io. But the idea is that we have different style bindings. You can bind to a class in different ways. You can also use style bindings. And these now finally have really well-defined behavior. These were one of the actual blockers for us to release Ivy because we want to make sure they're optimized and as fast to execute as possible. So here you can find their order of precedence. The build errors, again, build errors, they're good because we're catching bugs in production. So what we did here is to make sure that they're more readable and to make it more obvious where a certain problem is coming from. You can see here that we have posted an error that your problem comes from your app component HTML, where you have non-existing components. And with this error, we also have an error code that would open the doors for developing more advanced error reporting mechanism, where we can use these error codes to give you even more detailed description on how you can debug a particular problem in your application. So the build speed, this still depends, I guess. This depends heavily on your build graph. But still, because of the way we re-architected Angular with Ivy, where we have more local compilations, we don't have to analyze the entire application. We can have faster builds, which means that you have less overhead on top of the TypeScript compile. and internationalization. So over the years, I have talked to a lot of developers who were unsatisfied with the way that we perform our internationalization, which is entirely performed at build time. We have different reasons to do that. This is probably the most optimal way to achieve to build your application for just different locales, because this way you have different builds of your application for individual languages that you support, and there are no any unnecessary bindings that exist in your application and that slow you down during change detection further, because all the different substrings they're just embedded in your page. So we found a compromise solution where we're able to have much faster builds and at the same time don't have any runtime overhead. So what we used to do in Angular version 2.8 was to build your application for each individual locale. So if you have 4 different languages, we're going to build your application 4 different times. And that's obviously quite slow. We might be able to produce a very fast application in the end, but you still have to wait 4 times longer than you're supposed to, right? So what we did instead is to build your application only once now. Once we build your application, we're putting different markers where we're supposed to do some string replacements later. And right after that, for each individual locale that you have, we are producing 4 different builds of your application. And these replacements right here, they're really fast. So they come almost for free. Like not absolutely, because this still depends on the size of your application, but they're much cheaper compared to rebuilding all your templates with all their metadata. And this way, we are striving to provide a better compile time for internationalization with Ivy. Yeah, another improvement is in ng update. So now, in order to update your application, we're first going to install the latest Angular version of the CLI. We're going to do that because we want to take advantage of the latest improvements of ng update before updating your application. Once you run ng updates to version 9, we're first going to install Angular CLI version 9. Right after that, we're going to run the updates script for framework and for the CLI. Provide in is another addition in version 9. So you might be familiar with these 3 shakeable services that we introduced a couple of versions ago, where you were able to provide in a particular service in the root injector. So what we did in version 9 is to introduce 2 more values for provide in, which could be platform or any. Platform is particularly useful when you have multiple applications on your page or different Angular elements, and you want to share a single instance of a particular service across all of them. And any is the one which allows to have singletons for everyone, which means you have a singleton for your, let's say, lazy routes, as well as for your main application, for your root injector. So harnesses are related to testability in particular. Imagine you want to test an Angular application that is using different material components from Angular material. In order to verify that something happened after interaction of the user with your application, you often had to look at the structure of the DOM and couple your test to a structure of the Angular material widget that you're currently using. And this is not ideal because the structure, the DOM tree that given widget provides, like that's Angular material provides, this is not part of the public API. So it is very likely for us to break your test, even across minor versions. That is why we worked on test harnesses, which are inspired by the page object pattern. And with such test harnesses, we provide a high-level interface on top of the Angular material widgets that allow you to interact with them by using just different methods. As part of material, we also introduced different widgets. So we currently have YouTube Player, as well as the Google Maps Angular material components that you can take advantage of. And of course, we have TypeScript 3.8 support. It comes with a couple of exciting features. So the user-facing features that you're going to notice immediately are the optional chaining that we have been supporting in Angular templates for quite some time. You might be familiar with the syntax. It is question mark dots. In Angular, we used to call it the safe navigation operator. Now you can use it in your TypeScript applications as well. We also have the knowledge coalescing, which is pretty convenient for usage, especially compared to its alternative where you're using the OR operator in order to get a value. And if it turns out to be false, you may have potential issues in your application. As part of TypeScript 3.8, though, because these are all TypeScript 3.7 features, Microsoft introduced also type-only imports. So with Angular CLI version 9.1, you can take advantage of type-only imports as well. Yeah, this is probably actually the biggest user-facing improvement that we did as part of version 9, and it is around Angular Universal. So we introduced two large features in Universal. One of them is pre-rendering, and the other one is serve SSR. Pre-rendering is a way to run Angular Universal as part of your build process. So there are different ways to render your application. If you have a single-page app, probably the most common way to render it is to deliver a bunch of scripts to your user and right after that render the application entirely in the browser. This has its pros and cons, but mostly it's really easy to deploy because you just serve a bunch of static JavaScript and HTML files from a CDN. But at the same time, until you load all the scripts and until they render something onto the screen, the user is not seeing anything useful. They just see a loading page. So in this sense, client-side rendering is not ideal. If you want to improve the largest contentful page for your users, which means that if you want to provide rendered content sooner, what you can do is use Angular Universal. You can render your application on the server, and you're going to deliver a bunch of rendered content, a bunch of rendered markup that your browser is going to render. Is going to render pretty much into a web application. This is much better in some cases when you are aiming for fast, largest contentful page, but at the same time, it complicates your serving infrastructure because you need to have you need to use different on-demand compute engine, for example, cloud functions, or you need to have your on-prem solution, which is running Angular Universal, and it just complicates stuff. On the other side, with pre-rendering, you can take the best from both worlds. With pre-rendering, we're rendering your application as part of the build process. We're finding out which pages in your application are without dynamic parameters, which routes are without any dynamic parameters, and we're trying to pre-render all of them so that from each such route, we're going to generate just a static HTML file. Later on, we can take your application with all these static HTML files and just push it to a CDN where your user just can fetch a bunch of static assets. So this is what we introduced as part of the pre-rendering functionality. Serve SSR is something similar to ngServe, but for Angular Universal applications, which also have a server side, not only a client. Specifically for the pre-rendering, there are a lot of folks who experimented with it. For example, Steve here, you can notice that he rendered a simple project. I don't know how simple it is, which has 10,000 pages, and everything completed for about 75 seconds. This is probably also including the build time of the app. So my guess is that for the actual pre-rendering of these 10,000 pages, Steve spent about 15 seconds or so. And finally, the final feature that I'm going to talk about. So if you cannot pre-render your entire application, you can still deploy it as an Angular Universal application. Previously, this process was not too obvious because you still have your client-side assets, which are a bunch of static scripts, but you also have your server, which is an Express server usually, that you need to deploy somewhere, and you need to make it handle user requests. So as part of Angular Fire this time, version 6, the Firebase team introduced ngDeploy for Angular Universal applications that you can use pretty much today. you can give it a try by running ng-add angular/fire, and right after that, you can just create a Firebase project and run ng-deploy. So yeah, how you can take advantage of these features. If you haven't updated to version 9 yet, I would recommend you to do so. If you have any blockers and you're not able to find the solution for them online, please report an issue and we're going to look at it. But in general, we can just run ng update. First, make sure that your CLI is up to date with the latest version 8. And right after, just run ng update, Angular core, and Angular CLI in order to update both framework and our command line interface. If you hit any issues along the way, this is the place to go. You just select the version that you're currently at and your target version, which currently should be 9.1. And from there, you can take a look at the individual steps that you need to go through if the migration process doesn't go as smooth for you as possible. And that was everything. Thank you very much for listening to me. I would love to hear your questions and your feedback, especially during the panel afterwards.
Hey, Minka, thanks for great talk. Let's just pick quickly one question. So I think the talk was really helpful. So for people who want to learn more about the latest features of Angular and basically how to upgrade, it's very important. Like I don't think there is any other frameworks exist in this universe which provides so great development experience upgrade as Angular. So thanks for helping developers to make their lives easier. And so just browsing through the channel, and I see a couple of questions. Yeah, let's pick this one. So Mikhail is asking, does the new build system create some temp files to speed up consecutive production builds, etc.?
Yeah, so we haven't developed a new build system in general. We built a new compiler, which is being used by Webpack, which currently plays the role of a build system in the Angular CLI version 9. Webpack, they're going to introduce persistent disk caching as part of their version 5. And we're still in the process of talking to Webpack to see when this is going to be available as part of their tool. So yeah, we're really excited on introducing this. So as soon as Webpack has disk caching, we're going to have this in the Angular CLI as well. Until then, if you're working with a really large Angular application, I would recommend you to take advantage of Bezo. It has similar persistent disk caching already available.
All right, great. Thanks for your answer, Mikhail. I think it's answering your question. So now we'll jump to the second talk, and we leave all the rest questions to the final panel in the end of second presentation. So I welcome into the stage Vex Tatarevic. He's going to be talking about how to build basically your custom components using Angular without relying on any external library, which sounds really, really cool.
Hi, guys. I am Vex Tatarevic, and I am a software engineer, full stack developer. I work as a contractor for big private companies and also government organizations. I specialize in .NET Core technology and Angular, and build, these days I mostly build single-page applications. I have a passion for the self-contained modular components, and I like to build my own. In this presentation, and by the way, this is my first time live presentation, so I hope you don't mind if I'm a bit clumsy. In this presentation, I will show two basic components from my library, and I will also show you a little website that I'm sort of putting together that will host these components as well as full stack components. I'll just put my laptop down now so I can look at the big screen. Alex, if you, I will just show now. I will share my screen with you. And firstly, I will show, this is my website, which has nothing. It's vexit.com. This is just to show you where you can find me. And this is the new website I just put together yesterday, which is Vexit.io, where I plan to host these components. So as you can see, loading overlay and data pager are the two components that I will host today. You're also able to go and
cannot see your screen. Sorry, we see we look into different screens. Seems like.
Just for a moment. How about now? Okay, I'll stop sharing and. Okay, so it's this one. I apologize for that. Like I said, first time on here. So, can you see the website now? So this is the website where I will host these components. As you can see, there's a front end development components, and I will put the full stack development components. And this part here, this will be to teach people from scratch how to do full stack development. But for this class, I have prepared two front-end development components, which are the basis of web development, I believe, when you're working with a single-page applications, and that's a loading overlay and a data pager. So here I will show client app that is pretty much bare bones. So it doesn't have much on it. I have added a little bit of my architecture, the way I put the files together in the Angular application. So we can see pages folder, and that's where I put page components, like this couple of about contact home, just the 3 basic pages. We can see partials. That's the folder where I put the partial views. So for example, we have our typical top navigation that we are including everywhere. And then I have underscore lib. I put underscore so that this folder sits on the top. And then I have underscore modules where I can put my feature modules like admin or something else. So inside underscore lib is where I would normally put my custom libraries. So in this case, I'm talking about Vex UI library, which is my client-side library for the Angular components. As you can see, we have 2 components there. So there are different ways to do components. We can create a module. So as you know, in Angular, everything is module driven, so you can put components in the modules. But in this case, what I do, I try to make them self-contained. So each component has its own module. As you can see, I will just put this down, Simo. And so for example, in data pager, there's nothing but just one component, but I still wrap all that inside the module. So that allows me to simply just include that module in any other module where I need to use it. Like most of the time it's app modules, our root module. So you can see I've just included those, and straight away I can use it in the pages of this module. So first I will start with explaining loading overlay component. So with loading overlay component, it has a few things. We can see there is a component, there is a directive, a module, and a service. So module puts all these moving parts together. So it puts a component and directive, and then it exports it. So we need to export whatever we want to be using in other modules. So here is a commented out part. This is for older version of Angular, because in this particular component, we will use dynamic loading, dynamic component loading. In the older versions, it was required to use entry components. However, I've commented it out because now, as of Angular 9, we don't require that anymore. Now I will give a reference to the Angular dynamic component loading, just in when you can refer to it in your own time. So here it is. And then I will continue explaining what this component does. So there are 2 ways that I have implemented loading overlay, and that makes it a little bit different from in other frameworks. So this is an example, and first way, we can just overlay a particular part of our page. And as you can see, I can fire off these overlays at the same time. So in asynchronous single page applications, we know this can be important because we could be loading different parts of our page at the same time. But however, just for flexibility, if we want to overlay the whole page, there's also a way to do that. And how this is implemented. So first way is by using a directive, and that's called the Anchor Directive in the Angular component where we are doing a dynamic component loading. So this particular directive, what it does, it will load this loading overlay component wherever it is attached to. So for example, here, I'm just opening an example page that you just seen before. We have a stack of cards. So left card, which just to visualize what it looks like. So this card here, when we click on a button, it will display the loading overlay. So that happens by putting this directive and then basically putting a value for it, a variable that we define in our page. So this example page, I call it a page, it's a component, it's a page component. We can see these variables. So if it's set to false or to empty string, there will be the component will not be loaded. However, on click, then we are setting a message to that, and straight away the directive will load the component around this div element that it lives in. So we have a choice of passing a message in or not. So now I'm using this set timer just to simulate a call to the server. And so that will just take 1 second. And then when 1 second is over, then it will remove the loading overlay by just simply setting this variable to nothing. So that was one way through the directive. And now the second way is by using a service. So we have this loading overlay service, which can be used to set the global overlay around our page. As you can see, there's show and hide methods. So what this show method does, it will dynamically create an overlay around our body tag inside of our page. And so the way to consume that is very simple. Is basically we just inject loading overlay service, and then as needed, we just call show on it. And then when we want to hide it, we call hide on it. And we can pass a message to it. Again, here I'm simulating a call to the API by putting a set timeout to 1 second. But in the next presentation of data paging, you will see how we will use a loading overlay to actually display when our data is loading. So that's all there is I wanted to show about loading overlay component. And the next, I will go to the page search. So I'm calling this page page search. So basically what it does, it makes a call. I'll open here F12 developer tool so you can see what's going on. I'll just clear it and I'll just refresh this, but I'll go away, and then I will go there again. As you can see, now we made a call to the server. So now I'm running a server in Visual Studio. So this is application, server-side application that's hosting and has orgs controller. So this is the actual API in C# code. This is a little bit out of scope because this is server-side programming, but I just wanted to briefly show you what's happening there. And so that's basically running on IIS server, and it's hosting. It has a database, and it's making call to database and returning some data. And then basically we call it, and it will return data as for the page. So we're passing the page to it and the size of the page. And then the pager will basically render by calculating the total that comes back You can see the response will send back the total, and then it will calculate how to render. So the pager has, like any other pager, you can see it has a page links that will load, and then you can go next, and you can go to the end. And then I'll just skip to the code to show you it has different options. So this is the data pager, and it takes inputs, show range, nav arrows, show page nav arrows, and takes the value, which is the whole model. So you can see that models are stored here. So this is an interface that describes what our model has in it, which is a page, size, range, and total, and also tells you what is going to the server and what is coming to the server. So we basically, when we click on a page, we need to send to the server a page and a size of the page, and we will receive from the server a total, which we then update our model that is being used for the data pager. And then this is the example of the data pager, the page I was just showing you before. As you can see, I have not included any extra options, but now I will include this show range arrows. I'm just setting it to true. And now when we save, the hot module reloading will run, page reloads, and then this time we have these range navigation errors. So now we can skip. So this particular data organization, there's thousands of them, and so if we're just using this, it'll take us ages to get through all of them. So maybe we want to just go using ranges, so we can skip from range to range, and so on. And now what I want to show is how we can use the loading indicator, the loading panel, to overlay this while we are loading the data, so it looks a little bit nicer. It gives a user an indication of what's happening. So as you can see here, this is the VX data pager, and we are using an event page change, which we'll call the actual method, and inside our example. So we'll go inside there and find that. So this is our. So this is loading the page. Okay, so now when we load the page, we by default is the first page, and then we're calling the API service. So I provided here a service that actually. So this is Angular service that calls our server-side API service, as you can see. And so it's just using a get, and that will return an observable. So this is in RxJS library. So we subscribe to the observable that is returned in there, and then this will be the object that we receive. So which will be a data page model, as you can see inside the models that we are awaiting. And this data page model can receive any type of object, which will be the kind of object that you're displaying inside your grid or list or whatever it is you're displaying above your pager. So then inside the example, when we receive data pager, so you can see we have sent a page and we sent the size of the page, and then when we receive this back, we will grab the total and update our pager input, and that is the main object inside our data pager. So the way we're working with data pager here is by grabbing it directly, like this view child data pager component, and this pager input is the model that will be set inside it. This is as opposed to having to have all the, if instead of having all this in our page, we just keep this inside one model, and then we just pass that to the actual data pager. And so then when it gets updated, then it will re-render the page. So now what we want to do, I'm just going to update this a little bit. I'll uncomment this. and I will comment this bit of code. So what we are doing different now, I'm combining a loading overlay service, which I'm injecting, and I will display a message says loading orgs. I'm just putting a bit of a timeout here again, just to give it a little bit more lag, because otherwise it fires too quickly and you can't see it. And calling our service. And finally, I'm using from RxJS library, I'm using an operator called finalize. Now this is important operator, because what it does, if we just do, this is for hiding, okay, loading overlay hiding. If we just hide inside our on success, then that works fine when the loading, when the data succeeds, when the call to the API succeeds. But if it fails, then the loader will still stay, the overlay panel will stay, and we won't be able to access our interface. So we need to cater for the case when that doesn't work, if we receive some error, and that's what the finalize is for. So whatever happens, whether the call to the server side succeeds or fails, this finalize will be called and the loading overlay will be removed. So now we can save that and see what happens this time. So let's just refresh our page search. And you can see now it displays the loading overlay before the data is loaded, and then it's removed once the data goes through. So that shows you how you can use those two components in combination. Now here you can see a description of the pager. Now this doesn't come straight out with a pager. It's more like a convenience. There's a convenience method that you can use to print that out if you like it. So if you go to our example, you can see here is our pager control. But here we want to have this pager description. And so we are grabbing it from pager description. So let's see, where is that object? So pager description here is set when the data comes back from the server side. And basically, after we set all the data we need in pager component, we just call pager component get description, and that will give us our pager description. And then you can print it out separately above or below the pager. So that way it's not tightly coupled with a pager. It's more flexible for you to display it any way you like to your customer. So that pretty much wraps up those two components. Now, to also explain what I have provided on this website. So this is a website that I've just put together last night, pretty much using Bootstrap. I'm just using it for illustrative purpose to show what I'm trying to do here. I've provided here a downloads. By the way, this download is also one of the components from the VX UI library. As you can see, if you click on this, this will download. The download will start, and that will download our component, so you can have it. I've also provided a whole example code, what I've just been showing you here, so you can download that here. The sign up link doesn't work. This is just the setup. I'm only just starting to set up this website. If you want to follow as I progress with this website and release new components, you can just join. Here are our socials for the Vexit, and I'll be putting on updates for when we do that. Also, I will provide a link for the GitHub. So you can provide this whole example on the GitHub. So you can either type in GitHub, Vex Tatarevic, and that will find me, and then you can see different examples I have. Or you can just type in this link, and that will take you straight to the VX UI examples. It's just a client app, and with all this code that I've just provided. Also, I believe I'll just put it in a chat here. And yeah.
Right, great. Vex, we will share all your links, no worries. So we'll follow up on your talk. So guys, I will share all the links in description, and also I will tweet it. So
okay, thank you.
And now,
do you guys have any questions for me?
Yeah, absolutely, Vex. We are coming to that. So let's just pick one question from the list of questions. So which one you want? Okay. Have you considered integration with OData on content side?
What I haven't, I haven't much considered that. My idea is I'm going for .NET Core and Angular technology, and I want to sort of build components that don't depend on many other things. So basically, in the code that I provided, the components that you download, you're welcome to take the code and make your own components from it, or you can use it as a VXUI library. It's up to you. The idea is to have a maximum control of your code and have it encapsulated so that it doesn't depend on any outside sort of libraries. So that's pretty much it. But yeah, no, I haven't. If that's your question, to answer your question about open data. So with the actual, sorry, I forgot to mention that with actual data for this example, I am providing on this website that I'll be developing, so Vex.io. So I have like examples API, which will be able to use by front-end developers that do not wish to develop with .NET Core or such things. But I do encourage developers to sort of delve a little bit even in .NET Core if they can, and have a look how easy it is to develop it. That's what I'm trying to encourage. Building a full stack modules that can be pluggable. That's the idea behind it. And the next thing that I will be releasing is the architecture of how to have a module that you can physically plug in into working project, and then it works straight away without much wiring up or anything.
All right, great. Thanks for answering this question. We come back to the rest of the questions now. So let's have this awesome panel discussion. So what we will do now, guys, we come back to the questions. We will try to answer all those questions. I can see there's more and more questions popping into the comments, which is great. If anyone else has more questions, just shoot them out.
Or ideas, even. I appreciate just like people giving some ideas. I probably don't know a lot of things that you can come up with that it would be interesting to explore for me. So yeah.
And so let's then continue on Vex components, and I want to pick this particular question. What other components do you have in your library, Vex? Like you already show us just two components, which is loader and paginator. So what else have you got?
I have components like file upload, file download. Then I have not just the front-end components, but I have like a whole full stack components like authentication, authorization, user management, this kind of stuff, shopping cart, sort of like a working parts for the websites. That's sort of what I'm aiming for.
Right. Okay, great.
But I do have off the top of my head, I don't have it right now here in front of me, but yeah, I have about 10-15 components that are strictly front end. So right. Yeah.
And as they all will be available on this link, right?
At the moment, no, I'm not. What I want to do is start releasing them gradually. bit by bit, because they're quite rough, as you know, I do this in my spare time. But so I want to start with like putting the updates on my socials, and like you get sort of interaction, people give me some feedback,
Okay, awesome.
So,
yeah. So hey, thanks for the answer, and let's pick some questions for Minko. Actually, guys, there is interesting situation with the questions to Minko. I actually have a URL prepared by Angular community. So that's the link, and I would like to have some. I mean, if Minko can answer at least some of those questions, or that's basically the URL.
Sure.
So anyone can open this URL and you'll find out like a couple of questions. Like, okay, it's already 9 questions. So it was 7 questions. Someone put more. It was public URL in the Angular community. So yeah, if you can just scroll through and try to answer some of those, it would be really, really helpful, because people really want to know.
Yeah, sure. So there are a couple of questions which are related to feature request as local variable without ngIf embedded in Angular. Any plans to integrate instead of current approach like ngrx, nglet? There is also a question about using plus character in URL search parameters. There is a question about reactive forms and better typings and metadata in interceptors. So yeah, all of these, there is a common answer. We are doing planning for version 11 right now, version 10 and version 11. In version 10, we will not be shipping far too many new features. You should be expecting version 10 really soon. I published version 10 Angular CLI, next 0 yesterday. So probably in the next next month or so, you should be expecting version 10 without too many new features, but with a lot of fixes. In version 11, we'll be prioritizing some of these features. I cannot commit to a specific set of features yet, but everything from the list, except question number 5 maybe, is already... Yeah, everything except 5 is already on. We are already considering it as part of our roadmap. For question number 5, so this is related to after upgrading to Angular version 8, the production builds are failing because of MIME type error. Yeah, what you can do here is just disable differential loading. So you should just disable your target version to be ECMAScript instead of ECMAScript 20. Instead of ECMAScript 6, you can just use ECMAScript 5. So instead of 2015, you can just use ECMAScript 5. This way, we will not generate scripts with type module, and you're not going to have any issues with it. We are not going to touch this at all. We are on the opinion that it's a responsibility of the developer who is doing the actual deployments to verify that the assets are being served under the correct MIME type. And since we also have this workaround of not using script type module, we don't think that there is anything necessary to do in this area. Around version 11, we definitely want to have a recommended way to lazy load components and modules. So this is very high priority on the list of tasks that we're considering, and we definitely want to make it easier and more convenient. And finally, about the question number 9, which is related to Ivy, which did not reduce the size of your bundle size. Yeah, for some applications, unfortunately, there might not be bundle size reduction. As I mentioned during the presentation, we have small applications where you should expect some reduction. Large applications where you should definitely expect reduction because we're generating much smaller payloads from your templates. For some applications which are just around the middle, you may not see significant improvement in bundle size. However, what you can do is use very aggressive code splitting once we have official way to do that. Even before that, you can use it, but with less ergonomic APIs. You can check NGX loadable, for instance.
Right, I'll put the URL in description. And NGX loadable, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And talking about bundle size improvement, like in the latest Angular, you basically support now latest type. It's not already latest TypeScript, but for Angular it's latest 3.8, right? So and this optional syntax, which is like, I mean, I'm looking forward to use it, but I haven't used it yet in Angular, except in templates until it's been already available, but it's not been already available within the TypeScript classes. And how about like, is there any potential probability that optional chaining will increase the bundle size of your application?
I'll come back to. I just forgot to answer the question about Cypress.
Oh, sorry.
So I'm talking to Cypress very often, and we are in collaboration together. So currently, you can use Angular CLI with Cypress by using a third-party extension, by using Breebug Cypress. It adds schematics. It has Cypress schematics, which are going to transform your project, remove protractor, and make it entirely Cypress compatible. So you can use it. My guess is that it's very unlikely for us to introduce Cypress as a default solution because of a variety of reasons, but mostly because we are using protractor internally at Google, and we would want to have this effort reuse. We would want to maintain a single solution instead of multiple. That was about question number 4. About optional chaining, if you're using it very aggressively, it can increase your bundle size. I can share with you exactly to what optional chaining gets translated. It's pretty much, it can increase your bundle size. In particular, actually for differential loading for both, for your ES 2015 and for your ES5 bundles, because this is not part of the ES 15 standard. So,
right.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, thanks for answering this one. There is actually one more. There is more questions, so let's ask one more question to Minko, and then we'll ask one more question to Vex. That's a question from Kosta Malikov. Minko, is there any plans to improve Angular elements? For now, it is still necessary to use modules for Angular elements, and it makes them way too much.
So this is actually not particular improvement for Angular elements. We have the goal to make ng modules optional. So we are designing this right now. We are considering different options how we should implement it. And we almost reached a consensus, so we are almost there. There are different people in the team who have different vision for this. This is probably going to happen. I cannot commit to a date right now. This is going to make you no longer need to use ng modules with Angular elements.
Right. Yeah. Okay, there is a question for Vex. Vex, are you planning to release any full stack components?
Yes, I am. Probably. So what I plan to do is first to put like some kind of a white paper about architecture, that because what I want to do is not just put the components, but sort of enable a lot of people to come up with their components. And for that to happen, needs to be a convention for how this architecture works. So probably the first component I'll be releasing will be user authentication, because that's kind of, if you don't have a user authentication, you don't have a system. So that's the next thing on my list to be putting on that website, along with a couple of more front-end components.
Right. Thanks for the answer. Costa, I think it answering your question. And there is great question for Minko from you, Zen. Hi, Minko. We use a lot of feature flags to render different component for different customers. Lazy loading component with at input, at output seems still hard to use. Will Angular improve it? Any plans on that?
So what we're planning to do right now is make it easier to render lazy loaded components. Probably this is not going to happen in really near future. Like I wouldn't expect it in version 10 or version 11. I'm sure this problem is going to get higher priority once we make component level code splitting more mainstream and more usable. So I would expect it as a next way for improvement of this type of code splitting.
Right. There is one more very interesting question here. Hey, Minka, are you planning to introduce anything like a local component state in Angular? Like, in the React kind of things, they have like local component state. Is there anything like that you might think about?
Yeah, so you can think of, in Angular, you have this, in React, you have this explicit this dot state. This dot's like, you can set the state with this dot set state. With Angular in general, all the properties that are attached to your components, they're part of the state. So with the Angular change detection, we have this local state. There are different ways to approach the problem. There are different paradigms for incremental computation. So you can use the Angular change detection, and this way you have incrementality and local component state. NGRX, they're planning to introduce such local component states in a different way by using more reactive approach with RxJS. Like, both approaches are reactive, but RxJS is a slightly different paradigm. Instead of pulling for updates and checking whether there is a change, with RxJS, you're pushing updates. So you can use local component states in these both different paradigms. I think that's, I think I was about to say something more, but I think.
Okay. And are you like collaborating on this NGRX component with NGRX team, or are they just doing it separately? Like,
they're doing it separately, but we are talking to them very often. So, like, Rob was part of the team until recently, and we're still talking to him often. We also have Alex from Firebase, who is very active, who is actually designing something around these lines. So I'm talking to him daily or like weekly.
Okay, and like he's designing like also some sort of like, is it Firebase related or like I'm just curious.
He's part of the NGRX team, and he's designing some new features there.
Okay, interesting. All right, I'm looking forward to see that at some point when it's ready. And there is one more question. Yeah, I mean, guys, if you Vex, you can ask, or maybe Minka, what is the most popular opinion on each component have in a module? So the question is about, like, say if you have like 5 components in your app, would you create a separate module for each one? Like, what do you think? Like is there any pros and cons on this approach?
Sorry,
Yeah, you can go ahead. I can answer after that.
Yeah, Vex, do you have any opinion on that?
If say that again. If you have multiple components, whether you should put them in the same module or whether you should have a separate module.
Yeah. Like, say if you have 5 components and you have 5 modules, basically every component have its own separate module, right?
Yeah. So when I initially started putting a library together, I had one module and then put all the components in it. But I believe you get certain performance. I'm not sure how big performance gains are, but by putting basically components in its own module and then just including that in the modules where you need it. But otherwise, you have to include the whole library, or you could include in some of them module and have like just components used there. But I'm not sure if it actually loads the scripts for it. I'd say if you're including the module, like, it would be loading all the scripts for it. So what's your point, Minko?
In general, it depends on how you agree to use ng modules in your organization. In Google, we have projects which are following this convention. You have one ng module per component, but at the same time, each ng module adds some weight because in order to declare it, like, that's some source code that is going to be part of your final bundle. And also it adds more boilerplate. So some people prefer to not use this practice. At the same time, most people are using it as a lazy loaded context. So they have one ng module per lazy loaded context. We don't have official recommendation for this. You can agree you can discuss the pros and cons in your team and agree on one of these 2 solutions, but it's important for you to follow one of them across the entire team.
I've seen in a lot of organizations, they have like a shared module, which would be their the sort of components that they mostly use in most of their system. So they just include it all in a shared module and then just basically use that module everywhere they need it. That's also one of the practices used, but yeah.
All right, yeah. I think that's answering the question, Arjun. It's actually a very good question. And I like to ask, I like to think like about the future, right? So just imagining things, and like if you think about like 2 years ahead, like where you see Angular stands, like will it evolve in something like? I mean, are you guys having this sort of conversation inside Google, inside Angular team, like?
Yeah. It also
Any
depends
point?
who you ask. It depends also who you ask. We have different vision for Angular.
Uh-huh.
In general, we like web standards, so we're trying to evolve together with web in general. And my vision is that we're going to stay even closer to the web platform. We're going to inspire a lot of features in the web platform, and they're going to get native browser implementations, and we are going to adopt different practices that are happening in the browser. I see we're going to definitely keep working on the Angular debugging and development experience in general, and we're hoping for one evergreen Angular, where ng update is so seamless that it's part of your CI. So when you see a new version of Angular,
Right. Oh, that's interesting.
you can absolutely get a pull request with the migration for this new version and not have to worry about it at all.
Do you think is there like any Angular features might get built into Chrome browser?
So we have discussions with, we're talking to Chrome all the time. There is nothing right now obvious that we can use and that we can implement in Chrome. But there are some discussions around different APIs for more efficient scheduling of the Angular change detection. So it's possible, and definitely the browser vendors are talking to popular frameworks, trying to reduce their bundle size and making them faster. So
yeah. All right, yeah.
There is large collaboration around web standards in general. We're talking to TC39 very often. We're talking to W3C as well about different potential improvements in web components and ways to collaborate together. So there is like everything is happening very quickly and very dynamically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great to hear. Okay, let me look at our questions stream. Is there any more stuff?
There was one question about Clojure compiler earlier. From Andre.
Okay.
Any plans to embed?
Yeah, I got it. Yeah. Any plans to embed Clojure compiler? That's a good one.
Yeah, we're using Clojure compiler for everything internally at Google. We're using it in a stricter mode. So the problem with the strict mode is that your source code needs to follow some particular conventions. Otherwise, Clojure compiler may break it, and your application may not work. And it might be hard to track down why it doesn't work. In the way that we can use Angular, we can use Google Clojure compiler with these constraints disabled because they're quite restrictive. We're not going to get far too much benefits from it compared to Cursor. So that's why we're talking to the Google Clojure compiler team very often. They sit like a few desks away from us. So we are considering potential collaboration and making it widely available in the Angular CLI, but we are still evaluating this fit. Right now, probably it's not going to happen in version 10 or version 11.
All right, and let's get back to this question. One module per component. My question was more around having a large shared module with lots of components. Okay, I got it. Yeah. So did we answer it? Like, yeah, basically, what do you think? Like, when should you have one big shared module and when you shouldn't? I think we didn't much talk about it.
Yeah, my concern there would be about code splitting. So if this shared module is definitely used in all different modules that they're sharing it with, then it's fine. Otherwise, if this shared module becomes really, really large and the individual lazy loaded modules are using just small portions of it, probably it's not a good idea.
Yeah,
okay,
I agree with that.
yep. All right, so I think many Angular developers come to this situation, like especially building your first Angular project. Like I remember myself, like a couple of years ago, I have this shared module, like maybe 200 lines. It's important, like everything possible.
Yeah.
And then like look into that. Oh man, like how would you optimize it, right? And then hey, it's lazy loaded thing. Yeah, why don't try to use it? Let's create like multiple modules and lazy load it. Ooh, works well.
Yeah, we're hoping with optional ONG modules things to get even more.
Optional modules, right?
Yeah, which is bringing
I'm
us
looking
closer.
forward to that. Yeah. So you think that actually this approach with the modules, it will stay over the like sometime with the next?
Modules are not going anywhere. So we
But
can
they might become optional, right?
Yeah. We have the infrastructure to migrate all the applications to no longer use ng modules if we want to, because we understand the dependency graph in the compiler, and we can pretty much delete all the ng modules with ng update if we want to, and use another approach. But at the same time, there are a lot of courses and training materials that are using ng modules.
Absolutely.
We don't want to invalidate them, so we're trying to make things simpler in a backwards compatible way.
Right. Yes, I love the backward compatibility. It's awesome, especially for large projects. It's just so much time saver. All right, guys, do you have any more questions? Seems like no more questions. Yeah. So should we wrap up? I guess.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for coming to the show. It was awesome to hear all the cool stuff you're working on. And maybe we can chat in a couple of years, maybe months, I don't know, to get some more updates, guys, from you. So thanks for being part of it today. Yeah. Thanks a lot. It was
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, guys, who like the stream, you can just subscribe to the channel, reach out us if you want to be a speaker or anything like that. And yeah, maybe we come up online next week. We'll see. Peace.